You know what most people do? They inherit a belief system and never dare to question it. They follow it like sheep, not because it speaks to their soul, but because it's what their parents did, what their school taught, or what their community expected. And I've never been one to do what's expected. I was raised in the Christian faith. I knew the prayers, I knew the hymns, I knew the rhythm of Sunday mornings. But there was a point in my life when I looked in the mirror and asked a question so few dare to confront. What if what I believe isn't actually the whole truth? And now that's a dangerous question, isn't it? It rattles your very foundations. It makes people uncomfortable. But discomfort is where growth begins. I wasn't trying to rebel or run. I wasn't angry with Christianity. In fact, I respected it. But I had to know, truly know, why I believed what I believed. And more importantly, whether that belief system still aligned with the man I was becoming. I started reading. Not headlines, not angry tweets, but actual scripture. The Bible, the Quran, side by side. I asked the hard questions most people avoid because they're afraid of the answers. I listened to debates, visited mosques discreetly, sat down with scholars from both sides. And do you know what I realized? Most people don't want truth. They want comfort. But I wasn't looking for comfort. I was looking for conviction. That's when things got real. The more I dug, the more I understood, not just intellectually, but spiritually. It wasn't about switching teams. This wasn't football. It was about finding peace, about reconnecting with a clarity I didn't even realize I'd lost. The Christian faith gave me a starting point. Islam gave me the rest of the map. I know what some of you are thinking. How dare you question your own religion? And to that, I say, how dare I not? What kind of man sleeps through life following without understanding, following without asking? We question our politicians, our media, our celebrities. But when it comes to faith, we zip our lips and nod along. Not me. I won't be a quiet passenger in my own life. And neither should you. You know what always gets me? The way people treat religion like it's this fragile little thing, something too sacred to be examined, too holy to be questioned. That's not faith. That's fear. And let me tell you something that rattled me to my core. Aza's truth has no fear of investigation. If what you believe is really true, it can handle a few tough questions. It can survive scrutiny. It can stare criticism in the face and come out stronger on the other side. I didn't become a Muslim because someone convinced me with emotion. I didn't convert to shock anyone or to rebel. I came to Islam because I interrogated it with the full weight of doubt, skepticism, and logic, and it stood its ground. No dodging, no dancing around the issues, no vague answers. Just clarity, consistency, precision. I put it under the spotlight, and instead of melting, it glowed. What shocked me more was how weak the defenses became on the side I came from, not because Christianity doesn't have value, but because no one dared to have the conversation. Everything was built on tradition sentiment and the fear of offending someone. When I asked questions, I got discomfort. When I dug deeper, I got silence. But when I opened the Quran, I didn't just find answers. I found challenges, verses that told me to think, to reflect, to question. Islam didn't ask me to believe blindly. It demanded that I understand. And that's what separated it from every system I'd known. People will say, don't overthink faith, just believe. But let's be honest, we overthink everything else. We research phones before buying them. We review restaurants before we eat there. But when it comes to eternity, we're supposed to just close our eyes and nod. No, not a chance. I couldn't live with that level of intellectual laziness. So yes, I investigated Islam. I studied it the way a journalist studies corruption, deeply, critically, and without apology. And the more I pressed, the more it opened up, not with contradictions, not with confusion, but with logic and power. Truth doesn't panic when questioned. Only lies do. And that's how I knew I was getting close. In a world obsessed with dominance, ego, and shouting over each other, the idea of submission sounds like weakness. But that's the lie we've all been fed, isn't it? That to be strong, you have to be loud. That to be powerful, you have to control everything. Let me tell you something that flipped my entire view on life. As real strength is found in submission, but not to people, not to systems, not to the chaos of the world, to God. That word, submission, terrified me at first. I grew up thinking strength meant having the final say, being unshaken, always in control. But life proves very quickly that we are not in control. One diagnosis, one accident, one betrayal, and suddenly everything we built falls apart. So what then? Where do you find strength when everything human collapses? That's when I began to understand what Islam was really about. It wasn't about blind obedience. It was about aligning your life with something far more intelligent, more constant, more powerful than yourself. Islam didn't strip me of my will. It refined it. It gave me discipline in a world full of distractions. It gave me direction when everyone else seemed to be lost in a sea of moral confusion. Fasting wasn't deprivation, it was control. Praying 5 times a day wasn't ritual, it was realignment. It reminded me consistently that I am not the center of the universe. And in that humility, I found clarity. The truth is, arrogance is exhausting. Constantly trying to prove yourself, assert yourself, be the loudest in the room, it burns you out. But submission, a true submission to God, gave me the calm I never knew I needed. It quieted the noise. It silenced the insecurity. It gave me structure, not just in faith, but in life. And in a world that worships chaos and calls it freedom, that structure became my freedom. I don't expect everyone to understand that. It took me years to even grasp it myself, but I can tell you this. When I bowed my head to the ground, it wasn't a moment of defeat. It was the first time I stood for something greater than myself. And I've never stood taller. The moment you make a decision rooted in real conviction, watch what happens. People disappear. Friends go silent. Invitations dry up. Eyes roll. Suddenly, you're the topic of hushed conversations and backhanded remarks. Why? Because nothing threatens shallow relationships more than deep transformation. And when I chose Islam, I didn't just change my faith. I exposed the fragility of the connections I thought were unbreakable. You'd think people would admire someone for seeking the truth. You'd think they'd respect the courage it takes to walk away from the familiar and embrace something different. But no, what I got instead was suspicion, pity, mockery. As if my search for meaning was some kind of personal betrayal, as if choosing a path that brought me discipline, peace, and clarity somehow offended them. The truth, it did. Because my change held up a mirror, and most people can't stand their own reflection. But let me tell you something that most won't. When people walk away because you become more aligned with truth, let them go. That's not a loss. That's a cleansing. I didn't need people around me who only accepted the version of me that made them feel comfortable. I needed people who respected my courage to evolve. And if they couldn't handle that, they were never meant to stay. It's easy to stand tall when everyone claps for you. It's a whole different level of strength to stand alone, with silence on your left and judgment on your right, and still say, this is who I am. And that's exactly what I did. I wasn't rude. I wasn't angry. I was just firm. You don't have to shout to stand your ground. You just have to stop apologizing for who you're becoming. What I learned is this truth has a price. It costs you comfort, relationships, approval, sometimes even your past identity. But what you gain is worth every bit of it. Peace of mind, purpose, integrity, and most importantly, the ability to look in the mirror and know you didn't fold under pressure. You didn't cave to opinions. You chose what was right for you. So if they leave, let them. You're not losing people. You're finding out who really belongs. You want to know what keeps people stuck. Silence, that quiet, suffocating voice inside that says, don't speak, don't share. No one will understand you. And so they carry their questions, their doubts, their spiritual hunger in isolation, while the world spins with noise that says, stay the same. But here's the hard truth. Someone out there is waiting for your story to give them permission to start their own. That's the weight and the responsibility of living authentically. That's why I speak. That's why I share. This journey from Christianity to Islam wasn't just about me. It was never just about me. Because I know, and believe me, I know how many people sit in silence every day, terrified to explore truth that's pulling at their soul. Not because they don't believe in it, but because they're afraid of what the world will say if they do. Afraid of the labels, the backlash, the loneliness, the ridicule. But if my journey can serve as a bridge, if it can show one person that you can change without destroying yourself, that you can evolve without losing your worth, then the sacrifice is worth it. You see, this isn't about conversion. This is about courage, the courage to question, to search, to admit that maybe, just maybe, the truth doesn't live where you first found it. That takes guts. And unfortunately, we live in a world where playing pretend is rewarded and honesty is punished. I didn't just change faiths. I reclaimed my voice. I realigned my life. And if sharing that helps someone else lift their head, ask that question, walk into that mosque, open that Quran, then the judgment I took will have meaning. I'm not here to convince anyone. I'm not here to debate or defend. I'm here because staying quiet would be dishonest. And I've had enough of dishonesty dressed as politeness. If my journey unsettles you, good. Maybe it's meant to. Maybe it's the wake-up call you didn't know you needed. And if you're sitting there silently aching for something more, something deeper, something real, let this be your signal. You're not alone. You're not crazy. And no, you're not betraying your past. You're answering your future. Let's get one thing straight. People love a version of you that makes them feel comfortable, The moment you change, especially in a way they don't understand or approve of, they act like you betrayed them. That's exactly what happened when I embraced Islam. Suddenly, I was no longer the person they'd built in their minds. I hadn't hurt anyone, I hadn't lashed out, I hadn't gone mad. I had simply evolved. But apparently, growth is offensive now. I used to think that people celebrated honesty. I thought they respected courage. Turns out, they respect compliance. They respect the version of you that doesn't shake the table. The moment I stepped outside that box, I saw the truth. People don't want authenticity. They want familiarity. So when I said, I'm now a Muslim, it was as if I'd lit a match in a room full of fireworks. But here's the thing, I didn't owe anyone an apology. I wasn't going to shrink just to make other people feel tall. I had found something real, something I couldn't ignore, something that redefined everything I thought I knew about God, about life, about myself. And if that made people uncomfortable, so be it. Let them squirm. I'd rather be hated for who I truly am than loved for a version of myself that was never real to begin with. What amazed me was how quickly support turned into suspicion. Friends who once toasted to freedom of thought suddenly treated me like I joined a cult. Family members who praised me for being bold suddenly went quiet, as if my voice had become inconvenient. But I didn't retreat. I didn't shrink. I stood tall. Because conviction is not something you whisper. You wear it. You walk with it. People think faith is just about what you believe. But real faith shapes how you walk through the fire. When your choices are mocked, your past is questioned, and your silence is demanded. That's when you find out who you are. And I found out that I wasn't here to fit in. I was here to stand up. So no, I won't apologize for my evolution. Growth is not betrayal. It's courage.